good evening, and welcome to Counsel of the Day with Shanrae. I am Shanrae. Let me make sure that my volume is up so you all can hear me. We are on week 2 already of this month's Counsel of the Day. I'm coming on every Tuesday and every Thursday night of this month at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This month, the highlight, the topic that I'll be talking on is that the comedian Mr. Bean's disorder for the movie that he made, and it's on Netflix now, called Man versus versus Bee. You have to check it out. It's so comical. It's so funny. But I'll be talking about hyperfocus disorder this month. All right, so let's jump in because 30 minutes moves very, very, very quickly. All right, so let's start with the website disclaimer. Please be aware that due to the nature of the technology that I'm using, that there could be no assurance of confidentiality when using this online service. Should also be noted that due to changes in policies, that all replies will be used as advisory and information only and will not constitute an official determination. Information provided by myself are subject to limitations of current and available material. But the final responsibility for successfully achieving a goal rests with you, the individual. Information online is designed to be helpful. However, this information does change frequently, and it is recommended that clients or individuals will consult another physician, another specialist, and or religious leader to aid you in your overall wellness. All righty, so let's move this on. I want to do my I always give my bio information so you understand where I got my credentials from. All right, so I am a degree counselor. I acquired a dual bachelor's of science degree from Ashford University. One is in psychology and the other one is in organizational management. And my great passion is bringing healing to people who have been through traumatic and stressful experiences. All right. So when we as people, when we experience trauma or severe life stressors, it is not uncommon for our lives to seem like that it's unraveling. So I help clients who include children, adults, and family members to find healthy perceptions of themselves and to help them strengthen their relationships so that they can know themselves as peaceful, complete, whole, and safe. Again, this month, I'm going to be highlighting a disorder called hyperfocus disorder. This week's subtopic is it's a hyperfocus disorder and ADHD. All right. And so let's move this on. Let's move to our, I am a Christian. Let me back up. I'm a Christian counselor. So I choose a scripture for the month. And this month, I want to open this up so you can see this. The scripture for the month comes from Ephesians 4:23. I chose the New International Version, which says to be made new in the attitude of your mind. To be made new in the attitude of your mind. I actually think I'm going to use this scripture for my very last quarter, which will be November of this month, because this is so true. This statement here, this Bible verse is very, very true. To be made new in the attitude of your mind. All right, so let's move on to the key points that I'm going to highlight on tonight. Again, this is part 1 of week 2, and then I will see you for part 2 on Thursday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Number 1, first key point is how hyperfocus affects people with ADHD. Number 2 is what does hyperfocus look like? And you're going to hear me say this a lot for the month, what it looks like. Number 3 is the benefits of hyperfocus in adults and in children with ADHD. There's benefits to this. And then we're going to talk about the negative effects of ADHD and hyperfocus disorder. And then, of course, I'm going to always leave you with 5 tips or strategies to where you can get the most out of from being hyper-focused or experiencing that. So let's move on really quick because 30 minutes, like I said, it goes and comes so quickly. As you can see here, I was inspired to talk about hyperfocus disorder from watching this very, very, very comical movie on Netflix, Mr. Bean's Man versus Bee. And I laughed the whole time I watched this. If you get an opportunity to watch it on Netflix or any other app that you may have, watch it. It is so funny. Mr. Bean's Man versus Bee, and he displayed a severe case of hyperfocus disorder in this movie, and that's what inspired me to want to expound and to expose a little bit more about hyperfocus disorder. All right, so let's move this along. Okay, so, and let me open it and close it very quickly. It says how hyperfocus affects people with ADHD. All right, so this this theory, it has been excuse me, I'm just trying to get the right words here, but this theory comes from Dr. Keith Lowe, and he's a therapist and clinical scientist with the Carolina Institute for Developmental Disabilities at the University of North Carolina, Dr. Keith Lowe, and who specializes in these type of treatments for developmental disabilities. This is also medically reviewed by Daniel B. Block, okay, who is MD. So the name attention deficit disorder, we all know, we about know someone with ADD or ADHD, or some of us may have small symptoms of ADD or ADHD. So the name attention deficit disorder can give the impression that if you have ADHD, you cannot focus or pay attention to anything. However, this is very misleading because ADHD is actually a problem of regulating attention rather than a lack of attention. So children and adults alike with ADHD find it very hard to focus on boring and mundane tasks. Yet they can focus exceptionally well on activities that interest them. In fact, when they are engaged in a task that is that's interesting to them, they focus so well that it is called hyperfocus. So the ability to hyperfocus can be frustrating to parents. It can be frustrating to teachers, frustrating to your spouse. And as a result, in the comments, people, people have said, oh, they can focus when they want to focus, and which is true. People that experience, depending on how severe or whatever, it could be minimal all the way to severe. Yes, people can focus on exactly what they want to focus on. However, the ability to focus is more complex than just wanting to focus. Lots of people with ADHD, they do want to focus, perhaps on a lecture or what their partner is maybe saying to them, yet they can only hyper-focus on an activity when there is the right balance of personal interest and stimulation along with reward. Okay, so I want to bring it back around. Yes, people say that they can focus when they want to focus. With anything, you don't even have to have hyperfocus disorder. People will focus, anyone will focus on whatever is interesting to them, whatever is stimulating to them, whatever is rewarding to them. But those that are challenged with maybe hyperfocus or hyperfixation disorder, now they are learning how to move that hyperfocus or some of that focus into areas where maybe it is boring to them, but they have to learn how to, because a lot of times when it comes to responsibility and accountability, I mean, you don't even have to experience hyperfocus disorder. Most people will try to neglect the things they don't like to do. They will try to neglect it or do it at the very last moment. I had a friend who's gone now, they passed. But I had a friend say to me some time ago, years ago, that they work best under pressure. They seem like they can get everything, the most thing done when it's done right at the last minute. In other words, I think that anybody will put almost 100% effort into doing something when it's at the last minute. But that's what they trained themselves to do. Personally, I think that a person can get more done if it's planned out, if it's strategized out, and if you do things in bits and pieces leading up to what you need to, whatever to that final that date, that final date. But this is what the person told me. They said that they work best up under that pressure. Now, with me being a friend and a affiliate of the person, I noticed that whenever they did get whenever they planned something, they were planning to do it, it wasn't, you can see holes in it. So there were no, the I's weren't dotted and the T's weren't crossed. And it's okay if that happens here and there because of circumstances. But if that's the way it is constantly, where things are, forgotten or this, that, because you waited until the last minute, then that's kind of an issue. It leads to an issue. Let me pause. This is an open platform. So feel free to comment. We keep our comments respectful. Feel free, if you want to ask questions, I will pause and I will answer the question to the best of my ability. If it's something I don't know, I will research it and get back to you. Or if you want to share a life scenario, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So let's move on now to, what does hyperfocus look like? And you're going to be hearing this throughout the month, because hyperfocus, it is very broad. So what does it look like? So it says that when someone is in hyperfocus mode, they become so immersed in that task that they are oblivious to everything else that is going on around them. Now, I'm going to refer this back to the movie, Mr. Bean's movie, Man versus Bee. Mr. Bean was so hyper-focused on catching this bee and killing it, until it was so much, because he was trying to do so much things, trying to swat the bee, trying to do things with the bee, until he didn't realize the damage that he was doing around him in his house. He was so hyper-focused on trying to get and capture. As you can see the picture right here, he was so focused at looking at that bee like, I'm going to get you, until he didn't realize the damage that was being done around him in his home. Lady Demure says, good evening. Good evening. How are you? She said, I used to think that crazy like that. Okay, I'm sorry. She said she used to think crazy like that by saying that working under pressure is when I do my best work. But she said, not so. She does not operate like that anymore. And I'm so glad that with that growth and realizing that that high pressure, working up under pressure, it is not good for you, for your blood pressure. It's not good even for your psyche, because you're trying to get everything done. You're going to forget something. You're going to leave something that's very pertinent. You're going to wind up leaving it out, and then operating like that all the time, like, oh, you don't want to always be known as the person that almost does things okay. Like I said, here and there, some things, they can fall, things can happen, but not when you have the opportunity to plan things out. Not when you have the opportunity to strategize and to start putting things in place, ahead of time. All right, so let's move back. Thank you so much, Lady Demure, for sharing that experience. And guess what? We all have been in this situation too. Don't think that this is uncommon. You learn. You live and you learn. You live and you learn. When you learn, like, I didn't all the time. I didn't start out by planning and strategizing. When I wanted to do something, I learned as I went along through experience. Experience is the best teacher. So I learned how to do things better through experience. But the thing is, I learned, and that's the main thing. I didn't like doing things at the last minute and up under pressure, because I knew that I can't put my best foot forward when I'm waiting until the last minute to do something. There's no way I can give 100% effort. And I'm the type of person where I don't like because what you do, people they affiliate you with what the things you do and how how things turn out. So if I'm going to do something, I want to make sure that people sit there and say, wow, okay, she put a lot into this, she planned well, everything was done so nicely, and you can tell that she took her time doing this, and you can see the results of it. It was beautiful. That's the type of, yeah, that's me. And I learned, I strive to be this way because when you're embarrassed, and that's something that I'm going to talk about next year, embarrassment being your teacher. I didn't like being embarrassed, with different things. So embarrassment taught me how to do things better, So let's move on with this hyper focus. All right. So it says that when someone is in hyper focus mode, they become so immersed in that task that they're oblivious to everything else that's going around them. And it says that you may notice this when a child with ADHD is playing maybe a video game. Okay, and then you try to get their attention. So you call them, but then you get no answer. Then you try calling them a little bit louder. Still, there's no answer. Finally, you raise your voice to a shout, but you still get no answer. That's that type of hyper focus. Like you're going in like, what is going on with them? So let's move on because there are benefits to hyper focus. There are benefits. Let me open this up so you can see. There are benefits to experiencing hyper focus. All right. So it says that when there is a deadline, you can push everything else to the side and focus only on meeting that deadline. And so that's a benefit with someone that experiences hyperfocus disorder. They're going to meet their deadlines. Number 2, it says that if you hyperfocus on work-related tasks, you develop a reputation as someone who is talented, dedicated to their work. Plus, it means that you enjoy the time that you spend at work. So that's another benefit of experiencing hyperfocus disorder. Number 3 is at the beginning of a relationship, you might hyperfocus on that person that you're dating. Okay, and this intense level of attention, it is very flattering. It's flattering to the other person. It makes the other person feel like that you're so intoxicated with them, with them, and that you care about them that much. So that's a benefit. Number 4 is a parent can hyperfocus on an activity that they are doing with their child. So having a parent that's engrossed in a shared fun project with the child, it makes that child feel incredibly special. So that's another benefit. Okay. And so that's number 5, says a child might hyperfocus on an activity that builds their self-esteem. So this is very positive as living with ADHD. Living with ADHD can erode someone's self-esteem. So that activity, whether learning to skateboard or to program a computer, is less important than how it makes them feel. All right. So a hyper-focused type of situation with a child, it helps their self-esteem. All right. And so we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 6 is some of the greatest of discoveries and inventions result from individuals who have hyperfocus disorder because they have the ability to stay in the zone. So, and they are focused and they are immersed in an activity for hours and hours at a time. Let me pause here. Mark Zuckerberg, not him. I'm sorry, that's wrong. Twitter, X now, Twitter. What's his name? Tesla? What's his name? Okay, just slipped my mind. Y'all know who I'm talking about, the inventor of Tesla. He says that he's autistic. He has autism, Asperger's, I believe. It's Asperger's. What is his name? It's gonna come to me, and it's not Zuckerberg. Y'all know who I'm talking. He just took over Twitter, X now. He openly talks about him being Asperger's. Well, he can hyperfocus. Look at what he has done for himself with this. That's an advantage. He's the owner of Twitter, now X. The Tesla, the Dogecoin, and it seems like everything that he touches, it just turns to gold. So look at the benefits of this. Some of the greatest inventors are people with hyperfocus. Okay, so now let's talk about the negative effects. Let me move this along. Let's talk about the negative effects. Unfortunately, if it's not managed properly, If it's not managed properly, hyperfocus can cause many problems. Some people escape into their own worlds where they're daydreaming constantly, neglecting those things and people around them, ignoring important tasks, again, being responsible, accountable, that need to get done. And if this does occur, school, work performance suffers, relationships become strained. Okay. And so now let's break it down. Number one, at work, they might start missing their meetings, okay, or get behind in their responsibilities because they're so hyper focused on the elements of the job that they only enjoy. So that's a negative thing. Like if you only like answering the phones, or if you only like being on a computer, but you're not answering emails if you're doing admin, if you're not meeting your quotas and stuff, that's gonna lead to you losing your job. Number two, the negative effects of hyperfocus with your spouse. It may begin to start getting frustrated. The spouse may be starting to get frustrated and angry with you because they only seem to do activities that are fun, while the spouse is left with the responsibilities of everything and the accountabilities. That's not good. Good evening, Helen. How are you? So good to see you, Helen. Hyperfocus disorder. So that's number two. Number three, parents find that they get frustrated with children because when they're when they're hyper focused, they don't come to the table when dinner is ready. Their homework, they do their homework or help out with chores around the house without them constantly being reminded to do this. So that's a negative effect with hyperfocus disorder. Number four, life can get out of balance because it's easy to lose track of time when people are experiencing severe hyperfocus. Also, as a result, there isn't time to do their important activities like prepare healthy foods, okay, go to the gym or spend time with their loved ones. Okay, so that's a negative thing. Number five, they can become critical of themselves and then expect yourself to always be able to focus. When sometimes you criticize yourself like, oh, and they start saying negative things to themselves because they're having trouble focusing on the responsibilities of life versus the pleasures of life. For example, if they focus intensely for 12 hours in a day to meet a deadline, you wonder why you cannot do that the next day too. So sometimes that hyperfocus is on and off. It switches on and off. You can do it one day and the next day you're somewhere else hyperfocusing. So these are some of the negative effects of people that are experiencing hyperfocus disorder. Let's talk about some tips right now. And I'm gonna move this along because I think I had two. Yep, there we go. 2 slides. All right. Negative effects. Oh, wow, I'm way behind. Okay. 5 tips. Let's give you some tips getting the most from hyperfocus disorder. All right. So number 1, it says, let's match your career with your hyperfocus activities. So choose a career path that is in line with what you tend to hyperfocus on, what you like. So as Nadal explains, the saying that Nadal says is choose what you love to do as your life's work. I wholeheartedly agree in that. Choose what you love to do as your life's work. This way, your hyperfocus is put to good use in advancing your career. Plus, you will be much happier doing what you enjoy and getting paid to do it. All right. Number 2, if you are a parent of a child with ADHD, figure out what your child focuses on. Knowing what your child hyperfocuses on gives you an insight into their areas of interest and motivation. Now, again, this is a child that has ADHD and along with hyperfocus disorder. Everyone with ADHD does not have the symptoms of hyperfocus disorder along with it, but this is for those that do. Okay, so the tip is for the parent to try to find again what the child focuses on and give insight in the areas of their interest and their motivations. So it may not be what a typical 9-year-old is interested in, but with the knowledge, with you knowing, you could adapt their activities to include the area of interest that they like. For example, when an Olympic swimming champion, Michael Phelps, which he does, Michael Phelps, it does have, I think it's ADHD, and he has, he's on the spectrum as well. So when he was young, he struggled in school. His mom tailored his education around his interest in swimming to help him read. She gave him the sports section of the newspaper and made sure that his math problems were customized so they were swimming related. So that's genius. I really like the way his mother did that. She tailored his learning towards his interest to make sure that his education, his academics did not suffer. So that's a good one. Number 3, identify what your hyperfocus activities are. Okay, because there are specifics now. So when you know exactly what you hyperfocus on, you can choose carefully when you do them. So if you only have a few minutes before you're going out with your partner or before you need to go to bed, do not start a hyperfocus activity. Don't do that. Instead, choose to do them on the weekend or when you have larger chunks of time. As a parent, you can help your child do the same. Now, when I was growing up younger, and I'm mid-age now, but when I was younger, I used to see little television shows. That's when they didn't really have TV in color. We used to watch shows on a black and white TV, and we only had one TV in the house growing up. So we had to share what we were going to watch. But I remember seeing certain adults on TV shows that they would love to sit there and like build train sets or build boats. And this was, a lot of times it was men. And they would do this. And now that I'm thinking back on it, they hyper focus, like they can spend their entire weekend on doing this. And the wives will say, he's in there with the train set, or he's in there with the cars, with the antique cars. And now that I think about it, and now that I know through my studies and my discipline, I realized that was examples of an adult who was experiencing hyperfocus disorder, and they would choose to do what they like to hyper focus on the weekend. Now, they was neglecting their wife and children by doing it, but they use balance. They would make sure that they work throughout the week so they can provide for their family, but they chose to hyper focus all weekend long on their antique train sets or something like that. Lady Demore says, come on, somebody. All of us had to watch the same thing. Yeah, exactly. And for those of y'all that are on Facebook and Twitter, with my live stream, I'm seeing comments from all 3 platforms, from YouTube, from Twitter, and from Facebook. So if you're on one platform and you don't see the comment, that's why I'm saying it. I'm talking with Lady Demore, who's on YouTube right now. All right, so identify what your hyperfocus activities are. That's number 3. Number 4 says to set time limits. Set time limits. And it is helpful for parents to set firm time limits around, it's called escapism. Escapism. So activities in which their children tend to hyperfocus on. Sit down with your child, discuss the issue, and together that you can come up with predetermined time limits. Adults may also escape into television, video, or online chat groups and forums. So try to limit your time participating in activities that exclude you from the outside world. Figure out a predetermined amount of time to engage in these activities and then stick to that time limit. So set time limit. Number 5 says to set reminders. So figure out ways to establish cues. All right, cues that remind you of when it is time to take a break from that activity. Adults may want to set an alarm to help them break away from that task for a while. Parents can help their children to do the same thing. Parents can also give verbal and physical reminders. And sometimes verbal directions to turn off the video game is not enough. So a parent may need to give a tap on the shoulder or even stand directly between their child and that video screen in order to get their child's attention and help them shift to another activity. So I'm going to go over this again very briefly. So these strategies that it says tips, 5 tips for getting the most out of from the hyperfocus disorder. Number one is match your career with your hyperfocus activities. If you love like certain things, see if there's a career in it, make money off of it, and you'll be able to succeed in that. Number two is if you're a parent of a child with ADHD, figure out what your child focuses on. Like the example with Michael Phelps, the swimmer, famous swimmer, his mom, she geared all of his academics around swimming. Okay, swimming examples. Number three, identify what your hyperfocus activities are. I shared with you all how we watch the old school movies. Hey, Camilla, how are you? How we watch the old school movies growing up on a black and white TV. And and how we would see the father on the weekends. He would hyper focus. Again, I know now from my studies that's what was going on. The father would go and hyper focus over the weekend and try to working on them antique trains or them boats or them cars, and would just tune out the family on the weekend. They were disciplined enough to work throughout the week to make sure that they took care of their families. And on the weekend, they would tune everybody out and hyper focus on what they liked. And as they neglected their wife and kids, that was just, again, comical television. All right. Number 4 says set time limits, and number 5 says set reminders. All right. So again, I chose this topic, hyperfocus disorder, to bring awareness about this disorder. I can talk about me. I graduated college 12, 13 years ago. And I became very, very interested in psychology, the human mind. And from seeing different things, growing up, seeing different things, even experiencing some things. And then 2 out of 3 of our children was diagnosed with ADD, not ADHD, ADD. Okay, they didn't have the hyperintensity. They just had the ADD. And so I was really, really, I just submerged myself in trying to find ways to, stimulate the 2 out of 3 of our children, stimulate them to do their schoolwork and everything else like that. And it took a while. Because the doctor, the children's doctor, primary care physician, he did not believe that they had anything because they were so well mannered. The children were so well mannered. And so the doctor just basically said, all right, Miss Owens, I'm going to test them because you keep nagging me. And then when they sent them to the specialist, because I said, there was something going on because they struggled with their schoolwork, and it made them, they were frustrated behind it. And so when we finally went to the specialist and they were diagnosed with ADD, the doctor was both of the doctors, actually, they said, well, this is a first. They were baffled because they didn't have any behavioral issues. Thank you, Jesus. The children didn't have behavioral issues. So a lot of times behavioral issues were affiliated with ADHD or ADD. Mines were very well-mannered, and they were quiet. So when it came back, then we can start working on strategies with different things like that, and also get them on a slight medication. It was a slight medication, not too heavy, but it was a slight enough to help their whatever they were getting, the inputting in school. It was a crossing over, finally able to cross over to the long-term memory bank instead of just being stuck in the short term and then losing it. So I'm telling you from experience with this, 2 out of 3 of my children were diagnosed with ADD. I know that these strategies work because I've implemented them into my own home, and it's my own life with my own family. And they're all grown and adults now, and they are functioning very well. They've taken those childhood strategies and implemented them now into their adult years. their jobs. They work so well on their jobs. They, they still, I'm not saying that they may not experience some of what you call some of the uh tactics or whatever of it, but they know how to zone in. They understand the triggers, and they know what the strategies, they put them in place to help them be able to move things along. Now they did not have hyperfocus or hyperfixation with the ADD, but it was still, that was still at the time it was very it was something, with us. We knew something was going on, and when we found out what it was, oh my goodness, I had to talk at the time. Told my grandma, was talking to my grandmother, and I said, okay, we just found out that 2 out of 3 of the babies have ADD. And you know what she told me? She said, thank God there's a name to what they're experiencing now. And my grandparents passed when they were 95 years old, and 95 and 96. My grandmother said something that stuck with me. She said, when I was a child growing up in the early 1900s, she said they just put a label on people that had these different disorders, and they labeled them dummy or something like that. And she said, especially from our culture, they just put a label on them. And she said, and that wasn't factual. They may have struggled in this area, but they were brilliant. They were brilliant. But she said they just labeled people years ago before they even had a name for the disorder. So my grandmother told me, she said, thank God they have a name for it. And she said, and they also have ways to combat it. She said, this is a wonderful medical breakthrough. And she said, and you do everything you have to do to make sure that them babies succeed. And that really piqued my interest with going to college, going back to school, and getting into psychology. So this is my heart. This is why I try to come on 4 times a year. Every 3 months, I come 4 times a year to bring enlightenment about certain things, but also bring you strategies on how to combat it and how you can be successful and an overcomer. So we're going to move on Thursday night, and we're going to move on to part 2 of hyperfocus disorder and ADHD. Okay. Again, these strategies are here. I'm a half glass full type of person. I know that we can overcome anything if we go on and put the work in and get it done. All right, I will see you all. Oh, let me move along. Let me tell you. So Ada, let me tell you about Ada. Oh my gosh, I was so excited when I learned about this group. Ada is come on. Ada is a community, an online community that you can join for free for adults and people with ADHD or ADD or hyperfocus disorder. All you have to do is www.addapluscommunity.com. And it's a support group. And if you want to be a part of it, if you know someone who you feel they would benefit from Ada, oh my gosh, I'm so excited when I learned about Ada, this group. Ada Plus Community, www.addapluscommunity.com. It is free, and it's a support group, and they give you so much different tips on and just things with life, period. Join it. If you know somebody that this will benefit, go on and tell them about Ada. All right. So excited about Ada. Let's do our takeaway really quick. Okay, the takeaway says, and guys, I get excited. I get excited when I see that there are things, there are breakthroughs. There is always help out there for everything. I get so excited about this. The takeaway says some of the greatest discoveries and inventions results from an individual's ability to stay in the zone. Okay, or someone who has hyperfocus, fixation, or disorder, or something like that. Some of the greatest discoveries and inventions come from people like this. And I tell you, let's move to our quote. And I'm going to stick with this quote for the month. I really enjoy it. It says, you don't have to control your thoughts. You just have to stop letting them control you. And this is by Mr. Dan Millman. Lady Demure says, wow, Thank you so much. You are so welcome. Now, BetterHelp. I'm a counselor, but I don't mind giving you other avenues to go to. BetterHelp, and let me open this up. All right. So if you want a safe space to speak with a licensed professional online, BetterHelp offers affordable counseling sessions for individuals, couples, and family members. It's www.betterhelp.com. All right. So let's move this along. This is for my fellow counselors and theorists. This is where I got my studies from. You can go on and look through them yourself. And there we go. All right. So, if there's a past Counsel of the Day with Shanrae series that you missed or you just want to rewatch, you can go to my YouTube channel at Shanrae Price. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. Then select any past series that you want to watch. All right. And I'm going to always leave you with this because I am a degree counselor and I do one-on-one counseling. So, if you're interested in professional one-on-one counseling services, feel free to contact me if you choose to via Facebook Messenger at Shanrae Owens or via my email at shanrae.price@gmail.com. I'm a lifestyle strategist, and my aim is to aid you in your life's goals and your life's dreams. Listen, I do calls, quick calls. If you just need to strategize and work through something, you can inbox me. I do it by 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I do it that way, or I do it by the hour, 90 minutes like that, sometimes 2 hours. So you can contact me either through my email or through inbox me at Shanrae Owens. And if you just want to work through something, talk through something, I'm available and I'm affordable. All right. I will see y'all Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you so much for being a part of. Hey, Helen. She said, good teaching. You too, Helen. Have a blessed evening. I'll see y'all for part 2 Thursday night. Good night.